Good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos, todas, todes. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this presentation by Kristen Mapes from Michigan State University, which is part of our ongoing speaker series organized by the Transborder Digital Humanities Center Consortium, or in short, TBDH. I'm Silvia Fernandez, Assistant Professor of Public and Digital Humanities at UTSA, or UT San Antonio, and Principal Investigator to establish a center consortium of TBDH, a Mellon Foundation funded initiative housed at the Interdisciplinary School of Engagement and the College of Liberal and Fine Arts at UT San Antonio. It is an initiative that fosters community-engaged digital research, teaching, and collaboration on transborder and borderlands cultures, with a focus on the US-Mexico borderlands, local and transnational experiences across the Americas. Rooted in critical border studies, translanguaging and heritage languages, ethnic and race studies, gender and sexuality studies, responsible computing, and digital humanities, TBDH supports scholars at all levels through mentorship, training, digital resources, and experience exchange. By bringing together interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary researchers, educators, and community partners, TBDH seeks to expand ethical and responsible approaches to representing border stories in the digital cultural record. I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has supported this event, from our founders, TBDH co-PIs, who are present here, and our fellows, speakers, and contributors. To those who are watching us today, muchísimas gracias. Thank you. Your good intentions are invaluable in making this series a truly inclusive space for dialogue. To get this started as part of TBDA's mission, we are honored today to welcome Kristen Mapes, whose research exemplifies this critical engagement with transnational and transborder dynamics in global digital humanities. I will pass the word to Cristina Ortiz, one of our Spanish Master's Students Fellows, who will introduce her. Thank you.
We are so pleased to welcome Kristen Mapes with us today. Kristen is the Interim Director of Digital Humanities at Michigan State University, where she brings together scholars and students from across disciplines, builds pathways for digital humanities research, and amplifies digital work for a range of audiences. She also co-chairs the Global Digital Humanities Symposium and serves as chair of the executive board of the Association of Digital Humanities Organization. Her talk today, What is Global Digital Humanities? Reflecting on Opportunities and Challenges, offers both a theoretical and practical exploration of the Global Digital Humanities Symposium, how it functions not just as an event, but as a form of digital humanities praxis. She will invite us to consider conferences as critical spaces of knowledge creation and collaboration, and to reflect on what it means to work in the truly global dimensions of digital humanities. Following Mapes' presentation, we'll have time for questions and discussion, so I encourage you to engage with her work and bring your perspectives to the conversation. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who made this event possible, from our speakers and organizers to those supporting interpretation and accessibility efforts that ensure this series reaches a broad and diverse audience. You can follow Transborder Digital Humanities on Instagram, Facebook, X, and Blue Sky for updates on future events, and rewatch and share all of the Fall 2025 Speaker Series presentations on our YouTube channel. And now, please join me in warmly welcoming Kristen Mapes.
Thank you so much for having me. Let me get my screen shared. Okay. And I think that I hopefully have successfully also made it so I can see my notes. We will find out. But truly, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today. I really enjoyed hearing from the previous two talks in the speaker series. I've really enjoyed hearing from the Transborder DH community over the last several years writ large. We've truly been honored to have this community engaged with Global Digital Humanities as a symposium as well. They gave a just stellar, knocked everyone out of the park presentation as a panel at our MSU in-person days at the symposium last year. So what a thrill to be here with you all and having the opportunity to talk about the Global Digital Humanities Symposium, what it can tell us about global digital humanities as a thing, and also how we are thinking about it, not simply as something in the event planning mode, but really in the form of what doing digital humanities is in and of itself. So I really appreciate this opportunity to be here today. I put in the chat a link to the slides for this presentation. I also have it here, and I will share that after as well. I also want to get started by simply acknowledging that I am located here at Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan. This is a land grant institution that is fundamentally based on colonialism as its foundation, but then we also try to think about how we can kind of adjust that to be something that we could use for good in the world. But fundamentally, that's kind of where we're at. That's what MSU is based on. That's its remit, and it's built on land that is currently lived on by many communities, and historically has been the home of many people, in particular the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. And we are working in digital humanities at MSU to try to foreground the stories and the work of our colleagues and our the people who have been forcibly removed from this space in the past and the people who are here now. And I also wanted to foreground kind of in this spirit that there's a recently launched website from our Indigenous and Native American community at MSU called Native at MSU, and they have some really wonderful materials for people to learn more about culture, past and present. All right, so now kind of shifting to the Global Digital Humanities Symposium. I am going to very briefly give an overview, very briefly, of kind of what is the symposium, how did we get here, also a bit about what its values are and how we try to live those out, how those are kind of grounded in a theoretical underpinning that is at the basis of what we're trying to do with the symposium, and then look at how we can understand something about global digital humanities through the lens of the symposium. So very brief background about the event. So the symposium started in 2016. I included a couple of photos of our very first time running back in 2016. It's been running annually since then. So this upcoming April will be our 11th iteration. We had a great time celebrating our 10th symposium this past spring. It has always been housed at Michigan State University. It was initially run in person only, but always with live streaming and always free. From 2016 to 2019. And then in 2020, along with everyone else, we pivoted to entirely virtual. We had the joy of doing that in a 3-week turnaround time. So that was exciting. But then in 2021 and 2022, we continued in virtual format and really worked to think about how to take advantage of what virtual offered and how to really harness the opportunities that it gave us. In 2023, we returned to having some in-person activities, but now we run, it's a hybrid conference, but it's a hybrid conference in the sense that we have in-person days that are also live streamed and are entirely in person. And then we have virtual days that are entirely virtual. So we're not really trying to do the kind of both at the same time, but we do prioritize live streaming throughout. Starting this upcoming symposium, so 2026 onward, we are kind of expanding this a bit in that we're having in-person at Michigan State University for one day, and then we are having an in-person day at our international hosting partner. So this is something that we're starting in 2026 with Universidad de Monterrey in Mexico. Thrilled to have that partnership happening, and then we'll continue in future years as well. And we actually already have a partnership that we have begun for 2027, but we're not quite ready to make a full launch, but just know that we are planning for the future. I would be remiss if I did not talk, and I will talk about my colleagues who are involved in this symposium, but it would be a lost opportunity to not foreground and embarrass Kate Topham. If I didn't do that, I would be kicking myself. So Kate Topham joined the symposium planning team for the 2020 year and has become the co-chair. So she is my co-chair since several years now. And she is an absolutely integral part to the running of this event. So I'll talk a bit more as I continue on about the wide team, the large team of people who are involved in putting this on. I get the pleasure of being the voice of the symposium with you all today, but I speak as the voice, one of many, and Kate is an extraordinarily important part of the symposium. She initially was at Michigan State University, which is kind of what brought her into getting involved in this directly, but she is now at University of Michigan and has continued to be co-chair in her capacity there. So we appreciate as well the fact that the conference, while it still has the strong tie to Michigan State University, really involves people from quite a lot of universities beyond the one, and our growing partnerships beyond MSU as well, as I've said, especially with University of Michigan at the moment, among others. And with the symposium, we've also had the opportunity to write and share out about some of this work in some formal academic settings. In addition to presenting at conferences about the event, we were delighted to have a two-part special issue of Reviews in DH that came out in December 2023. That was particularly focused on the symposium from that year rather than a retrospective thing. But I wanted to, again, to give a bit of a window into the people who were involved in this. The team, there was a group of people who worked, they were the content or the program planning committee for that year's symposium. Heather Ball, who's at St. John's University in New York, Viola Lasmana, who's now at California State Long Beach, myself and Isabel Munoz Martinez, who is finishing her PhD in Norway, and Merva Tekguler, who is at Stanford doing their PhD as well. So that special issue series in Reviews in DH was a really robust collaboration among that kind of subset of people involved in the symposium. Another kind of outcome or output of the symposium that, again, shows the collaborative nature of the people who are involved includes this piece in the Daria Teach Open Educational Resource course on social justice and digital humanities, where we were served as a case study for them. And so that piece was co-written by Taylor Hughes Barrow, who was an undergraduate student at Michigan State and is now pursuing a graduate degree at Northwestern University, Arun Jacob, who's at University of Toronto and has been involved in the symposium for many years, Viola Lasmana again, myself, and Kate Topham. And so, again, an opportunity to include and prioritize and really take advantage of the perspectives and voice of our collaborative team from over the years. Okay. So a bit of history of the symposium. I'll talk in a moment about kind of what are some of the things that we try to do in conference planning and in conference execution that are forms of doing digital humanities work and kind of speak to the evolution of the event. But I also want to just set us forward and set us out with kind of the theoretical background and underpinning of the symposium. So fundamentally, what we're trying to do is that we're trying to grow global digital humanities, but we're seeing this through the lens of conference work, and particularly digital humanities conference work, as a form of DH praxis. So this is doing digital humanities work. This is not only a forum through which digital humanities work is shared, although it is also that. It is similar to the way that infrastructure work in digital humanities is also digital humanities work. That's the perspective that we see. Conferences are critical infrastructure for this facilitation, curation, and creation of knowledge through which scholarly communities coalesce to inspire each other and empower each other to enact positive change. And that's what we're trying to do with this. DH conferences are indispensable infrastructural component to cultivating the scholarly record. And we also see the way that we're doing this work as kind of part of making all of the value of conferences kind of more available and prioritizing access to that kind of scholarly forum and that scholarly kind of credibility and community. So we're building in doing this, we're building on critiques of community in digital humanities. We're building on critiques of conference organizational history and critiques of labor in the way that we are thinking about this. So we particularly appreciate the work from about international collaboration and language dynamics in digital humanities and seeing that the labor involved in planning, organizing, and executing conferences is rarely discussed as a form of DH praxis. We see how inclusive representation and community diversity can be involved or can be done through conferences, and that's a part of kind of what we should be doing in the field. That if we want to have global digital humanities as something that grows and as something that is not simply kind of recreating the kind of Western canon, then we need to be a part of building it, because we've seen scholarship about how representation at digital humanities conferences has not really reflected the opportunity and the work happening globally among scholars. And so where can we kind of work to fill that gap? Now, this particular article that I am kind of pointing to here is certainly looking back at a period of time that has passed. Things have gotten a bit better in the last decade in terms of representation. We're extraordinarily thrilled, of course, that the big DH conferences will be going to South Africa in 2028 and was in Mexico City in 2018, but that's not very often. And this is why I was so excited to hear from James last week. We're talking about the African Digital Humanities Symposium, but there's still, of course, it only happens if a lot of people do a lot of things. And so we're trying to do our part too. All right, we're building on and framing the planning of conferences as a form of DH praxis in and of itself. So we're trying to create this zone of contact, this place where different types of work and different types of people can come into contact with each other that's not entirely based around trying to make things about the northern, kind of the academic norms in the northern hemisphere. So that's a difficult thing to do when we are positioned at Michigan State University and we're trying to kind of leverage and balance the opportunities that provides with the positionality that can, is baseline extractive. So that's something that we're working on kind of pushing against through the community building that we do. Okay, so I'll share some of the things that we're doing in this work in the symposium as tied to some of the core values that we use to orient the decision making that we are undertaking in doing anything, including conference planning. There's always a dynamic of needing to figure out what can be done with the resources, whether that's time or financial or expertise that we have available. We can't do everything all at once. So we're always having to figure out where to prioritize our efforts. And those have to be guided by our values. So fundamentally, our top value really is cultivating community. This is probably unsurprising. I'll share a few of the ways that we try to cultivate community, and I'll share momentarily about how that's kind of evolved, but talk a little bit more about evolution later. So We try to cultivate community by having a diverse group of people involved in the planning. We have a planning committee and we have an advisory committee. So this is something that has developed and kind of we worked toward figuring out what the right structure for our practicalities and values are. And this is our structure at the moment. So we have a planning team which meets once a week and includes people from Michigan State, people from our international hosting partner, and then other people who are involved and committed to the conference. So as we can see from this group, we do have a mix of people. It is something where we have some people who are returning, some people who are new, and we're excited to be able to have kind of both new perspectives and kind of returning expertise year to year. So this committee is really focused on doing the work of the upcoming year's conference. Weekly meetings mean that we do, that's a lot, but it also means that we're able to keep up with things and try to make it so there's actual accountability for kind of more people to be involved in doing things rather than kind of falling accidentally on the people who are better at homework. to be honest. So then we have our advisory committee, which meets once a month and has an opportunity for a wider array of people to bring their voices and get to know the conference a bit, and also to kind of bring that hopefully even more perspectives from different institutions and different geographies and areas of expertise. So because the time commitment is lower, because it's once a month, we're bringing the advisory committee into decision making on some of the larger conceptual things that we're working through in the planning, both kind of aside from any one year, but then also at key moments as we're looking toward the next year. And that's kind of how that dynamic works between advisory and planning. That's so far working well for us in terms of building a community of people who are involved in making the thing happen. We also try to cultivate community by having the decision-making process for the program be something that's relatively open. So we operate with an open peer review process of submissions. And when those submissions and the reviews are all completed, all reviewers are invited to join what we call our decision-making days. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks, which means I need to get my reviews in. But during those decision-making days, all reviewers are welcome to join. We have a big Zoom call, and we put everything into a Trello board. Where we have the submission information and the review information. It's kind of ranked by the aggregate score, but we look through pretty much everything together and decide which submissions to accept and which to let go, which might need to be accepted, but in a slightly different format. And while we're doing that, we're putting it together into the program. So this isn't a space where it doesn't just go to a program planning committee of a few people who are making all of the final calls, but we really appreciate the variety of perspectives that come into those days of making all of those decisions. And we build the community by opening it up in this way. We also try to cultivate community by intentionally only having plenary sessions. So I say only, we do have one space in our conference that's not plenary, but we prioritize having everyone in the same room in order to try to cultivate a shared experience of what the topics are at hand and to not segment things out too much. This kind of plays in as well to our program construction process, where we do not want to have, here is a Mexico panel, and here is a India panel, and here is a, West Africa panel, and they're all in different segmented spaces and they're not coming together. So for us, this ties into a value of it being community building by everyone being exposed to the same things, which admittedly does happen even more in an in-person conference than with virtual, where people are often just coming in for one session or another. Certainly in person, it kind of has that impact a little bit more. But also it really ties to the value that we have of focusing on global digital humanities rather than focusing on any kind of particular regional focus or geographic or methodological focus. So for us, that rings true to keep it kind of as cutting across things as possible, almost like a potpourri approach to things, which we find very productive and joyful. We try to build community by having hospitality. Now, we also do that because that's just a good thing to do as a host. But we've also certainly tried and thought about how to do that both in the virtual context and in the in-person context. So we've run virtual trivia sessions as kind of social activities in conjunction with our virtual days of the symposium. I think we're kind of known for our wooden spoon swag, maybe not, but we love our wooden spoon swag. So where we have, something that's a takeaway, but that's very kind of practical, a little bit more sustainable, and something that's again a bit joyful. Another value that we have kind of ties into all of this as well, but specifically kind of or a little bit distinct from the community building value is that of equity and inclusivity. So how are we attempting to create a space that promotes equity and inclusivity? So a few kind of things that we do that we're committed to, and again, this is when we're having to make our decisions about our budget or what we're doing. These things are things that we care about, right? So it's absolutely essential, and it will always be the case that the symposium has free registration. And that's also on a practical level kind of useful because we don't have to deal with registration systems. It can create some challenges when you're organizing, as I'm sure my Transborder DH hosts understand. When you're organizing free events, you have people who, what I call aspirational attendees. So they register because they think it's great and they believe it's great, and then their schedules take over, and then your attendance it's a bit hard to predict, especially on a virtual event, but also true for in-person. So we have come to understand our free registration as something that, number one, is a top value for us for that equity and inclusivity purpose. And I've come to embrace the aspirational, overly optimistic registrants because it's an endorsement of at least what we stand for. And so I see that as a piece of feedback. That said, if you register, please do try to attend. We appreciate it. We also focus on funding presenters when they're presenting in person. So that has kind of evolved a little bit over the years. For 2026, we are offering 4 $400 travel bursaries, reimbursement bursaries for presentation at Michigan State's in-person day, and similarly 4 $400 travel bursaries for a presentation at Universidad de Monterrey. So equally granted to each in-person space. This was something we really thought about a lot when we returned from being entirely virtual, of whether that could be kept, whether that was defensible. But we really think the in-person experience is really valuable, even though it's not going to always work for everyone for a whole bunch of different reasons. So trying to fund presenters for in-person presentation. And then we're in a kind of luxurious situation at Michigan State where we have kind of on-campus housing that we can offer to presenters at a cost that's manageable for us to be able to provide, to just lower that barrier to attendance that much more. For equity and inclusivity, we also have always, and I've said this, but prioritized live streaming the event. And we share recordings of the events as well. So we do this with granular presenter release forms, and we work to turn off the live stream if someone does not give consent for sharing that out. So we really care about making things as available as possible, while also making sure that presenters have control over that. So that opens up access a bit. We also have developed proceedings since 2021. So our proceedings are really a low barrier to entry for proceedings in that they are basically a curation of the conference slides, recordings, abstracts. Presenters have the opportunity to opt into our proceedings. It does not require that they write up a full kind of written artifact of their presentation. So it's again, a fairly low barrier to entry for inclusion. We work with Knowledge Commons to make that available, and I'm excited to see how Knowledge Commons continues to develop its infrastructure for supporting journals and conference proceedings, and we'll be able to benefit from some of that kind of continued infrastructural development. With the Global DH Symposium, we also have, since 2021, really prioritized thinking through what multilingualism can mean for us. This is a tricky one. It's something that we care quite a lot about, but for a global DH symposium, it is sort of an impossible task to figure out how to sort of choose languages, which at a certain point, if you want to commit to multilingualism, we have to choose something. So we have started out by, and I'll talk about this maybe a little bit more in a minute, but we started out in some ways and have developed, and to the point where for this year we are doing as much as possible on the website and in our communications to offer information bilingually between English and Spanish. And we're only able to do that because we have partners who are willing to do a lot of translation fairly quickly. So that is, we're able to do that, and we're only able to do that because of our team involved. And we provide and prioritize with our budget, providing live interpretation for the virtual days of the symposium at this point between Spanish and English. So all presentations are translated for virtual days from either English into Spanish or vice versa. That's something that up until this point, we've done only for the virtual symposium because of the affordances of Zoom's live interpretation, and also a bit of a budgetary thing. We're curious to see how in the future we might be able to bring some multilingualism to in-person days as well, but that would be something to come in the future. All right. So we've covered community, cultivating community, equity and inclusivity, and the third value that we're always, that you can see from even just the way that I've spoken already, but we're always iterating and evolving. So we're never wanting to say this is what the symposium is and it cannot change. There are a few things that hold extraordinarily true that we care a lot about. We care about it being global. We care about it being free. We care about things being available as broadly as possible. But aside from that, we're quite open to experimentation. So a few kind of examples of that I've alluded to already with multilingualism. When we first started, we chose to offer the virtual symposium in English, Spanish, and French, and the kind of that decision making was coming from our community of trying to open things up to our Latin American colleagues and with the Spanish approach, and then also to our West African colleagues with the French approach was the idea. Things are very, especially early on for us, it involves needing to find people who can do interpretation live on Zoom for you and have the expertise and kind of capacity to take that on, which we are very fortunate that we have a great partner that we work with who are based in Chile, and they're a translation and interpretation company that we've now worked with for several years. So for our Spanish language interpretation, we kind of know who to go to. We trust them. They like working with us. We've kind of got that sorted out. Figuring it out on the French side, we're never able to figure that out in a way that was kind of manageable for the labor involved and working enough in the community outreach that we had at the time with the intended target community. So that's not to say that there isn't more that we could do or that might not return. This is simply to humbly say that there's, in order to do this stuff, you need to really be in touch on, not necessarily on the ground, but deeply in touch with the communities that you want to reach. And we weren't there. So we tried with Spanish and French and English for a couple of years. We shifted because we were seeing some interest and presentation submissions coming from China. So we shifted to offer the conference in Spanish and English and Mandarin Chinese for a year. And that didn't really have the uptake either, for honestly a similar reason, as well as the fact that we didn't really have a go-to interpretation place. So finding people who could do that interpretation, sorry, my thing is going loud. Finding people who could do that interpretation was something that was just, it was a difficult ask for kind of not quite enough trade-off. Again, doesn't mean it can't come back, but we've decided since then to really focus on trying to do Spanish and English well. I'm not saying that we're perfect on that front, but that's what we're attempting to do. All right. I mentioned as well briefly, or alluded to briefly, the planning committee structure. That's something that has absolutely evolved over the years. I won't go through each of the kind of iterations of this, but for quite a number of years, we had one planning committee, and that planning committee met once a month, and then we tried to think about how we could have subcommittees that could take on different roles and have those meet independently and report back to the monthly planning committee. That sounds like a good idea, but it didn't end up really working for us in terms of kind of that regular enough contact for people coming from a bunch of different institutions and working all remotely to have that level of kind of touch, basically, to keep things chugging along through the year. So in the last couple of years, that's where we have developed into our planning committee structure and advisory committee structure. Where it is an ask for the planning committee folks to do every week, but they do get to be kind of really deeply involved in cultivating that community to make the thing happen. So that's what we're going to stick with, at least for the time being. With modality and locations, of course, we've shifted and iterated with that. I'll be honest, kind of driven by necessity, or at least that's what really pushed us into action. So we shifted into virtual because obviously it was 2020. And then we shifted into our, as I explained, our hybrid modality because we were getting tired of being entirely virtual. So then we kind of brought that back in 2023. We'd been thinking and talking in various ways for several years about how to and whether to partner and have multiple iterations of the symposium across the globe. How would that work? We need to build the community in order to make that happen. And then a year ago, we had an election, and the entire environment of what it means to do social justice involved digital humanities work, and for people globally to engage with trying to attend places, come to the US to do anything, changed. And so that necessitated us to finally just make the call and start planning future iterations of the symposium with an international partner. And like I said, we've been thinking that would be a good idea for a long time, and now we're actually doing it. So there we are. I am really glad that we're actually doing it. I'm very excited for what this does for us for this upcoming year and for the long term. So I've talked a lot about the Global DH Symposium so far, and I hope that it's interesting to hear a little bit behind the scenes, but just also see how it's driven by the decision making that we kind of all have to do. I want to spend just a couple of minutes thinking about what Global Digital Humanities is and what might we see from this symposium and the 10 years that we've had of the symposium about what Global DH might be. All right. So over the course of the 10 years that we've had the event, we have seen I just did the math, 481 people present at the symposium. So this is a map that is deeply imperfect, but Kate Topham has done an excellent job of making this map happen. It shows the locations of those presenters. So those locations are their institutional location at the time of doing a presentation. As we all know, that's deeply imperfect if we're thinking about what geographic representation might mean, what global digital humanities might mean. But without a whole bunch of in-person interviews about people's topics and everything, and kind of how they might self-identify globally, it does give us a window into kind of the where some global DH work might be happening, at least that we're reaching. And it certainly shows us that we have a lot of work in this field that's coming from the North American and Western European context. Now, none of that is a shock because that's where a lot of the kind of funding infrastructure is. That's certainly where our community, or we have maybe the most visibility and inroads to other scholars, where people might have the space in their schedules to attend this sort of thing and kind of have the feedback mechanisms and support mechanisms for presenting at a conference like this. But we're also happy and excited that we have robust participation from a wide variety of places around the world as well, and not only kind of associated with one year or another, or when we were entirely virtual or not. So it's a window into things. It's not a perfect view of global DH. If we look, and this is going to be very brief, but just to share also that kind of when we're thinking about what global DH is, in some ways trying to look at what the symposium shows is going to be imperfect because it's so shaped by what we choose to put in our call for proposals, right? So each year since the last, at least 2021, I think even a bit farther back, we, in our call for proposals, structure it such that we have kind of our long list of topics that we're interested in, which that remains largely unchanged year to year. And then we have what we call our especially topics. So these are the topics that we're especially interested in hearing from in that one year. So we don't have a theme year to year, but we do have these kind of loose, small foci. And that's a little bit is what drives our keynote presenter selection. But I just threw out here kind of just so you could see all together the types of things that have been in that category in our call for proposals for the last 5 years. And, we're focusing on, and this, things like, what does global mean? Topics around intersections of humanities and medical humanities, issues of advocacy and activism, precarity in infrastructure change, things about surveillance and AI in various forms. And these kind of aren't even to get into kind of our regular call for proposals topics, which are interested in issues of indigeneity, issues of transborder work, issues that push against Western modes of thinking as being the only ones that should exist, and also just like interest in pedagogical focus and community engaged work. So, our call for proposals does not necessarily reflect the breadth of what people might be doing. But if we look at the types of word frequencies in the abstracts that we received, we have some we can see over a 9-year period, what are some of the kind of major topics here? So we can see that there's a lot of discussion about data. That's not surprising in a digital humanities field. It's interesting to see how much we had discussion about data in the year 2020. And we can see that when we're looking at global DH, we have some kind of pedagogy in there, but far kind of outweighed by some of the other topics like literature and history and archives that we see a bit more prominent. So we might learn something by looking at some of these word frequencies. another kind of set of word frequencies. And this graphic was particularly created for that Daria piece, which was, again, in an OER about social justice work in digital humanities. So we were particularly curious to see what topics we might uncover when we're looking at kind of some word frequencies around some words that would be of interest in social justice work. And we could see that we have certainly a lot of colonialism mentioned, decolonialism in particular, anti-colonialism are very common kind of topics that we're looking for with the symposium, but certainly also are quite common topics for people to be talking about, at least in this global DH context. That's my last slide, but I did just want to close by saying that, you know, what global DH is not something that we get to choose, but it is certainly interesting to see the breadth of topics that do come to our event, and also to see how we can engage with global digital humanities initiatives in other institutional contexts, in other regional organizational contexts, to connect with the work of our colleagues out who are doing the African DH Symposium, who are doing, we work with Red Acha Day as well, separately in other contexts. We're really interested in seeing how we can kind of fill the gap that others aren't already doing. The goal of the symposium is not to kind of replicate what regional DH organizations are doing, or what other kind of initiatives, particularly those kind of based in the global majority, global South area are doing, but really to say, where can we kind of intervene to do something that others haven't yet, or we could give a boost to. So thank you for spending the time with me today to kind of hear a little bit about this, reflect on it with me, and I'm really curious to learn from you all and hear what questions you have.
Thank you, Kristen, for the amazing presentation. I think we all learned a lot of valuable information surrounding the work behind Global Digital Humanities. I wanted to open up today's Q&A with two questions about your experience. The first one would be, what initially had you interested in working within the digital humanities? I'm really curious to know. And another one was that you mentioned on Global DH's response to critiques and building on those critiques. What critiques have you found to like resonate with you and your work, and what has like stayed with you, and what can you say has been implemented in response to those critiques? Thank you.
Ooh, okay. Well, the first question is, I'll go ahead and just share. So I got into digital humanities kind of coming from, I'm a librarian by training, so coming from that context, and also a medievalist by training. And so I was especially interested in how we could work with medieval manuscripts in ways that were like interesting and created new knowledge. And so I was kind of initially coming at it from a library, special collections, material culture sort of perspective. And then I started to work in a more broad area, as we often are. Our interests and our what we get exposed to kind of morphs as well. So I've really appreciated being able to kind of be in the place where I get to encounter, work with people from all sorts of different kind of fields, and see how what digital humanities looks like across those different fields. But I certainly still have a special place for kind of archives and digital collections, and I mean, I'd still do my medieval studies stuff too. Yeah. So to your second question, I want to give a special credit to when we've been working in doing some of the writing around the symposium in the couple of places that we have thus far. Arun Jacob in particular is very good at being able to bring into our conversation some of the theoretical and intellectual kind of underpinnings of the work that he does in thinking about counter surveillance and in thinking about labor ethical practices and these things. So I just want to first of all give credit to Arun for being such a very careful scholar who has kind of illuminated and brought things to kind of at least put them more in front of me than I maybe might have noticed. So at that process of working collaboratively in in doing the thinking that the kind of these writing opportunities have given us the space to do is something that I first of all want to give a call out to. I didn't specifically mention, but of course Rupika Rizam's work is um, immensely influential in everything that we are doing here. The context of thinking about the global as local is something that I didn't say explicitly, but I should have, because it really is in the background of what we're trying to do. When we think about global digital humanities, what we're not trying to do is think about creating arguments that are meant to apply across the whole globe, right? We all, I think, know this, but just to say as well that when we're talking about global work or global DH work, we're talking about understanding something that is locally situated and contextualized. And that also then means that when we are doing our work, we need to continue to think about what we're doing as situated and contextualized ourselves as well. So I think that's probably the thing that I return to either tacitly or explicitly kind of in my mind on a regular basis. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for your answer.
Yes, we have a question on the chat, and it's Marina, and she's asking, is a data visualization of the word volubility for the abstracts for all submissions or only for accepted submissions? And how do these terms, sorry, and how do these terms relate to the terms used in the CFP?
Thank you, Jessica. So the first question, the word, the terms are related to the abstracts of accepted proposals. So there is certainly a whole analysis project that could be done that dives deeper into the relationship between the way that proposals that are accepted kind of use language that relates to the CFP. And there could also be a really interesting analytical piece that looks at proposals that are accepted by comparison with kind of the wider array of submissions. That's not what I have had the opportunity to fully put together for you. So in some ways, these kind of graphics are a bit of a teaser, or not a teaser because that implies that I am in the process of otherwise putting this together. Unfortunately, that's not kind of on my research docket at the moment, but it would be extraordinarily interesting to kind of do some of that analysis and pull that together. I think it would also be really interesting to look at some of the other places where global DH work is happening, whether it's looking and doing some text analysis or citation analysis, although we don't really explicitly require citations in our abstracts, so that would be an imperfect kind of approach, but it would be really interesting to kind of compare this with another set of scholarly discourse from either another conference or a journal.
You can go ahead and unmute, Marina.
Oh yeah, and maybe you spoke to this, and maybe I didn't like zone in at the time. Are you collecting like data on the participants, data on the presenters? Like I know, for example, you had the maps, right? But like, what other kind of data about their backgrounds are you collecting, if any? I'm just curious.
Sure. We do have, although we don't have it kind of structured in a really clean and easy to analyze way at the moment, but we do have information about whether people, well, it's imperfect. We generally have information about whether people are like graduate student, the presenter is a graduate student or a different type of faculty member. and we can have institutional affiliation. One thing that I'll admit is an imperfect thing in our data set, which we could go back and improve, but it would take a fair bit of data cleaning, is that we have a number of people who have presented multiple times over the years. And that's actually a part of I see that as evidence for kind of that we're doing community building, that people want to come back. And that's something that we love to see. People's institutional affiliations change over time. So our kind of single spreadsheet of all the past presenters doesn't actually take into account when someone has changed institutional affiliation. So we could go back and try to map that, and then it would update the map a bit too. For example, we have some people who have, started off in one continent and then have changed location or a different continent. But we might only have them on the map from the location when the first time they presented.
Can I ask a follow-up? I'm curious, what about people who don't have institutional affiliations? Like, what percent, how do they participate, and what percent of participation do they make up, like community partners?
Great question. It's a small percentage. We do have people who either identify as community partners or independent scholars, or occasionally some people who are kind of just outside of the academic or kind of glam library museum environment. It is a small portion though. So what we do, and I'll confess, I would need to just double check if this is how the process that Kate used in translating that information into the map. But what we do is we'll often just put in a location that seems to be where they are located in the world rather than their institutional affiliation. At the very least, we do that when we're trying to plan for the program, because we do attempt to not schedule people at terrible times for their time zone. But that is a bit of a guessing game because people might not be in the same location that we think they are at the time they're presenting. So it's a bit of guesswork, and it's a small portion. It would be great if it could be a larger portion. We're very open to that. The outreach piece of it is probably the biggest hurdle.
Thank you for sharing all this. It's a research project in itself, right? Like, how does this come into being? It's very interesting.
I appreciate the questions.
Kristen, I have a question, and first of all, I want to thank you and congratulate you and all the team for all this work. I have seen this work since I was a graduate student, and I would like to hear about the impact of creating this space of global digital humanities and the big umbrella of digital humanities, or new incoming people that have joined the digital humanities. What has been some of the benefits of creating this space of global digital humanities? Because with your presentation, I'm even reflecting about how I have been invited to be part of projects because we met in the Global DH Symposium and has really pushed for diversified groups and really identifying other expertise and other representations within people that has been in the digital humanities for a long time or that are new. But I think that has been an impact within the work that I have been doing and with whom I started collaborating with DH. But I'm wondering about what you have seen.
Well, I'm not, in some ways, I might not be the best positioned person to be able to speak to the impacts because I feel awkward about it sometimes, but also because I'm not kind of out there in the same way seeing it, right? And actually, Sylvia, I should check and see what what location I have for you in my spreadsheet of presenters, because I think you've moved locations since you first, and I have always appreciated when you and Myra, who I see here as well, gave a keynote for us back in 2019 as well. So yeah, the impact of I mean, I think what Global DH is, we don't own it, first of all. Like, that's the most important thing. Like, this is not something that we made up, nor do we get to take like credit for it growing in the last decade. A lot of people have been working in this space in a lot of different ways, whether they are working under the kind of phrasing of Global DH or not. It has been a bit unfortunate to see the Global Outlook DH community kind of, it was quite robust at the time when we started the symposium and doesn't seem to be as vibrant anymore, which is maybe that's not necessary, but would be nice if that were the case a bit more. I'm trying to think of a good example. This is where I like feel awkward sometimes because I don't want to seem like we're boasting about the impact we've done. Lots of people have done lots of work. I think that the greatest kind of impact that we've been able to have is that we have seen people who've had their first opportunity to present at a conference at all through our conference and have said that it was, very scary. Not that we were scary, but that presenting at a conference is intimidating and scary, and that they came out of it excited to do the next thing and to continue their research, and that they felt supported. And I've heard that several times. And so I think that is the kind of biggest impact that we can have, that we can make it a space that is known for being a welcoming space for scholars who are senior, who are interested in sharing their work in this venue, and welcoming space for people who are new. I mean, I mentioned Taylor Hughes Barrow, who co-wrote the Daria piece with us. She was an undergraduate student when she co-wrote that with us. She was able to use her experience working with us for the symposium and the publication that she had that came out of it to kind of not be the only thing, but that helped her get into her graduate and PhD program at Northwestern, where she is thriving now. So, those are a couple of broad and then one specific example that I can ramble into.
We have a question by Dr. James Yeku, and he's asked, well, he said, thank you for a truly insightful presentation. Could you speak to what networks of solidarity look like in Global DH? I am thinking here about the paradox and ethics of decentering the hegemony of Euro-American DH and also working with allies in these dominant spaces for an inclusive DH.
Yeah. Well, I certainly don't have like the full answer on this one. But to the networks of solidarity, what do they look like? I think that the thing that's most powerful is that when we try to learn about each other's work, then we understand and see, well, not that we understand, but we then see the humans there. And through that, we can then, we can then make connections and support the humans that are doing the work in and on the kind of places and topics that we want to support, that we care about, that relate to our own work, relate to the work that we think is important, et cetera. And so to what the networks of solidarity look like, there's certainly many. It comes from human to human connection, right? And so what I think our symposium is able to do is to kind of bring people together so that they can then form those connections with each other. I like to hope that what we can also do kind of institutionally is be a stable place where those networks can be formed, where those connections can be formed, and that we operate with a small budget by necessity, but also kind of on purpose, because it means that we're able to be more robust when budgetary challenges might happen or whatever, and makes us more nimble. And I'm undergoing those challenges right now in my institutional context. So, but this event is one of the things that's everyone at Michigan State agrees requires requires a meaningful budgetary contribution. So I'm curious to also learn from others in the room if you have like other kind of networks of solidarity that you found to be particularly effective. I am at this point also involved in ADHO as an organization, so I can speak to what at least ADHO is trying to do. But that is kind of a very it's an organization of organizations, so it's not really the on the ground network. It's not really meant to be. James, I've rambled for long enough. I would be really interested to hear from you too.
Oh, I think we're on time um, with this great presentation, Kristen, and for a couple of questions. Is there any other comment, questions? We can have a couple of more minutes. But thank you so much, Kristen. Your work, and I know you don't, and the team don't own Global Digital Humanities, but has created a very safe zone for many new DH scholars, and has made also possible these new networks of DH after attending the conference and after facilitating these conversations that you all at Michigan State have been doing.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be able to be here and to do the work at all, and to really support and foreground the work that you all are doing. It is our DH practice. It's our intervention. It's what we're doing, but it's really only possible and meaningful because of you all and your colleagues who aren't here in this Zoom room at the moment too. So keep doing that and let us know how we can improve too. How we can. I mean, we're always learning. So thank you again so much.
Thank you. And as we close today's events, I want to extend once again our heartfelt thanks to Kristen Mapes for her insightful presentation, and to all of you who have joined us throughout this semester's TBDH speaker series. We have the opportunity to hear also from Alexandra Senatus, James Yeku, and Kristen from different perspectives that are influencing and enriching what we are planning to do with Transborder Digital Humanities. Although this marks the final talk in our fall 2025 series, the conversation doesn't end up here. Recordings of all these sessions will be soon available on our YouTube channel in both English and Spanish, so that you can revisit these talks and share them with colleagues who may be interested, and use them in your classroom, as well as within your research. Stay tuned for next semester speakers who will talk about the Digital Borderlands Institute at the University of Arizona. Megan Sansonay and Veronica Reyes will be joining us. And I will have the pleasure also to be announcing today. It was announced in the Latin American and Caribbean Digital Humanities in Puerto Rico that next year in September of 2026, we will be hosting the conference in UT San Antonio in collaboration with the Transborder Digital Humanities, as an effort to keep creating this transnational, transborder, and global networks. Thank you again to the Mellon Foundation and UT San Antonio, and to the support of our co-PIs who are here present, and UT fellows. Have a great evening, everyone, and we will look forward to our next presentation and discussion on Transborder Digital Humanities next semester. See you then. And please follow us to stay tuned for our next events and for the work that we're doing. And we look forward to the Global DH Symposium. Thank you, Kristen, and everyone.